Hello, hello. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Sales Table. And today there is a surprise, by the way, because instead of talking really about the sales and the sales enablement and the AI impact, we switch the topic and we are going to talk about product management and how it is getting impacted with AI. And today I have a great and my favorite guest, Mike Smart, and we've been talking about this topic for almost about a year or so, and we keep joking, are we ever done talking about this topic? But today here we are. Before we get right in, Mike, right away I'll probably talk about it. Can you give a brief on how did you kind of really get into product management at all?
We don't, well, this is 30 minutes, right? So we don't have that much time to tell that story. But I'll give a short version. So like most people that come into product management, there is no prescribed path, right? People come in from a lot of different ways. And I have to say that I'm unique because most people do not come in from the angle that I came in. I came in through sales. So I had been a sales VP, sales director, a long time carrying a quota in a bag, so to speak. And I went to work for a company who didn't have a really mature product management organization. And I pleaded to the CEO that he needed to create a change state. And he didn't know this, but behind the scenes, the head of product overall, including technology, was recruiting me to come work for him. So we announced all of a sudden a surprise, and I joined the product management team. And I found that this is what I was supposed to be doing. Um, I think a product manager is a mix of a lot of different skills. And I think the more diverse background a product manager has, the stronger she or he will be in the role. I think the more depth of business experience they have and enough technology, and you can figure out the right mix of that on your own personality or your own style. I think it is a mix that you can carry on the kind of work that needs to happen. So that's how I got into this. And my career accelerated much faster than it had been in sales, and I ended up running a large team at the pinnacle of my career in that role. And then I stepped out of that role after a merger between two like companies, and my skills and talent were no longer needed. And I moved into consulting on the premise that all of the changes I'd gone through could have been a lot more productive, not learning everything in the trial by fire mode. And I started doing consulting practice, and that's what I've been doing since.
That's amazing. So, Mike, I mean, just to kind of take a step back on the whole of the product management in general, looks like the entire product management role and then the ideas really started from Procter and Gamble. I was kind of looking at where did that whole product management really came from, and then what is the whole history and the journey for us to really understand where we can go next from the AI impact standpoint of view. So there seems to be Procter and Gamble basically said, hey, you know what? There is too much of pressure on salespeople, and then we want to kind of take that off a bit. And then they created somebody called as brand man. Is really the title of the person, and then looks like that later on really got caught up in the industry. And when Hewlett Packard, HP kind of really came in, they had very similar challenge, which is I think HP is the one of the company that almost for about 40 years or so, they had double digit growth every single year. And that seems to be a pretty big deal in the Silicon Valley, is what I realized. And HP is the one which basically said, hey, you know what? We need something like that. And then they created what they call as the technical product manager to really understand. Nobody really at that time understood what is a bit and byte means, what is the hard drive, what is the disk and whatnot. So to kind of really make sure that some of these people speak the customer's language is really where the product managers came in. So with that as a kind of context, Mike, um, I want to get your perspective of how the product management has progressed over a period of time, and especially where are we today?
So it's interesting. You did a great bridging of over 100 years of growth and maturity in the role, right? And in less than 30 seconds, I think that's pretty good, Suresh. um, but I think you nailed it. Recently, Melissa Perry, who's well-known thought leader in product management, posted an article giving a tribute, and I don't remember the gentleman's name at Procter and Gamble who came up with the idea for the brand man. We now know politically correctness, that would be a brand person. But the idea was it was not a selling job, right? So you're talking about a period in consumer packaged goods when the notion of professional sales was just getting momentum, and they realized that there needed to be something else to convince people to go to shelf and pull product off shelf. And it wasn't the out there aggressive sales guy or woman pushing product at the point of sale. It was somebody creating the entree in. And Hewlett Packard absolutely did perfect that model for technology, and in part because it was needed. And you had said it was successful. They doubled it. The ramp on selling and growth was good because they converted all of the tech ease that had consumed the industry to make it approachable for people outside of technology to absorb consumer product. So where are we today? We're still in that model, kind of pulling at the fringes of it. We're still, I think, in a maturity curve, kind of moving forward. And in conversations with people that I talk to, and some of them you know as well, John Cutler, I just drop names, John Cutler, Phil Hornby, Niels Davis. These are people who've been around the space. Steve Johnson, been around the space for a long time. I think they have perspective that can take in the multiple decades view of this, which I think is important when you start describing a phenomena that moves across a timeline of, say, 40 years. We're still early in the game, right? I mean, I was thinking about this conversation we're going to have, and I was thinking about things like the advance of the internet. And Suresh, I know approximately how old you are, but I also know that you remember when there wasn't really an internet. And we go forward now, fast forward 30 plus years, and we have completely redefined the way we do work. This venue that we're in right now would not have been possible 30 years ago. We would not have been able to do this. Does that mean we don't meet in person anymore? Of course not. We actually cherish those in-person meetings more than we probably ever did. Pressing flesh means more to us now than it did 30 years ago because we have all these alternatives. But it also means we have the facility to be a lot more productive. I mentioned I came from a sales background, and I think about 30 years ago when I was selling what it took to book a meeting with the customer. One meeting could be an all-day event, depending on where that customer geographic, or a week-long event, depending on where that customer geographically was. When I was a strategic account manager, corporate account manager for DEC back in the days of selling mini computers for a national account with presence all over the world, I could have one meeting with a customer that take a week to go and deliver on. And now we do those things fast. Has it eliminated the role of corporate account manager? Absolutely not. Um, does that mean that corporate account manager can be a lot more productive? Of course. So when I think about product management in this context, we are stretching, we are pulling at the edges of next level, next generation productivity breakthroughs.
Gotcha. So, product manager and productivity seems to be the combination that's working well. So, Mike, when we look into that, we've seen the era where there is the whole of the product management as a role that is kind of coming in, and especially kudos to some of these product management organizations like Pragmatic Marketing. I mean, that's something that I cherish a lot. I mean, again, just from the simplicity aspect of what they did, I love that framework. And then it also came into a place where people really got confused, especially after the Scrum, Agile methodology has come from, because now we've introduced into the roles of the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the product manager, and the business analyst, and whatnot. Again, I mean, today is not the idea for us to define those, but then there is already enough confusion in the market where when people are really coming up, they are like, oh, you know what, should I be a product owner or a product manager? And then I've been a product owner, and then there is this new company that is out there. They're asking me to do the product owner role. I mean, is that fair? And then on the top of it, I think kudos to some of these companies like Google, Facebook. I mean, in general, the FANG, and then those terms change every single day. But they've actually definitely much more formalized the role of the product manager to be out there, really helping and working with as a translation between the customer, the sales, and the engineering teams to build the right product. But now, with that confusion that already exists as part of the roles and responsibilities, and now we have AI on the top of it, and everybody is really now challenged as to say, AI is there, but how should I use it? What is it going to be the biggest impact for me? And you already said it, which is productivity for product management. So when we kind of really look into that whole gamut of things that we already have, there are so many tools that product managers can use. There are so many variety of roles that product managers can have. Now, on the top of it, we have another layer as to really say, how can product managers actually use and be much more productive using AI? So in your discussions every day with your customers, how are you really thinking about AI as to kind of really bring in? Because I always think of the evolution, not a revolution. If that is so, how are you thinking about that evolution from PM's perspective?
So your title of this webinar was will AI replace product managers? So my short answer, less than 20 minutes in, is no, it won't. And I think, and I want to give a shout out to people who've talked about this early on. So this conversation started in earnest about 3 years ago, when there was a lot more emotion and a lot more uncertainty and a lot more confusion in the space. We were anticipating the onslaught of the $4+ trillion of investment that's now flooding the marketplace of AI, and some hundred, I don't know, 35,000 AI companies that have popped up all over the globe. And those people who engage in that conversation, I'll give more shout outs. I mean, I think about people like John Cutler being one, and Phil Hornsby, and other people who jumped into that breach and said, whoa, slow down. And I'm going to echo some of what they have said, which was, this is going to change the way we approach work in the same way that you and I described the internet changed the anatomy of work. It absolutely has transformed it. It is not going to replace, just like the internet has not replaced. I'm not aware of any specific roles that do not exist anymore because of
Yeah,
the internet, unless you think being an SQL programmer was a role that was for the long haul, right? I mean, there used to be SQL programmers that wrote structured query, and that's all they did. Those people now hopefully have transformed into data and analytics experts. So they've progressed, and to your term, evolved with the time and involved with the kind of technology that's available. I don't believe that product managers are going to become extinct in and of themselves. That's the short-term view, right? Long-term, we have no idea. I don't think anybody does. But I do see a massive breakthrough, and there are countless tools that product managers use today. And I think about some of the early ones that I used as a product manager and still toy with. I don't use them daily, like Aha and Jira. They all have AI plugins. Monday has an AI plugin. Asana has an AI plugin. I go down a long list of tools. There's probably 40 or 50 of them. They all have some available capability using AI, air quotes around AI, whether that's large language modeling or some type of early stage agentic AI implementation that helps product managers become more productive. Let's translate to what that means. It means that the product manager who is on top of that and using those tools and absorbs those use cases and becomes familiar with them, and I'd say even go further, become expert in them, is always going to be in demand. And will they be able to do more than they've done previously? Can we get to the point where AI agents help us construct user stories and epics so we don't have to iterate on them for days at a time? Absolutely. Does that remove a lot of the friction that happens in the translation process between UX people, developers, and product managers? Can we get AI to the point where it helps us identify strange anomalies inside the product backlog so we don't have product managers literally paging through pages and pages of files and or God forbid CSV files doing crude search mechanisms to let us know that something should be aged out of the backlog as opposed to keeping it there? Yes. And if a product manager or product owner has defined themselves around those tasks, then they're not going to be as valuable. Does it mean that we'll have the same number of product managers going forward as we have today? Probably the ratios will change. Part of my consulting practice consisted of, for years, helping leaders identify how many product managers do we need, what does the org structure need to look like, how do we optimize the role of product management as we make this investment. And all of those numbers that I used to shout out and scream out, and there are a bunch of surveys out there in the world that gave them to them, I think are going to be blown up. So that rule of one product owner slash product manager per development team, or one 8 to 1 or 1 to 8,
Seven,
the
yeah.
peak, yeah, the 1 to 7 ratios, all the things are going to be completely blown up. And I don't know if it's going to become 1 to 20 or 1 to 15. We used to have numbers for how much quote unquote revenue accountability a product manager should be responsible for. The numbers used to be 5 to 7 million, sometimes pressed to 10. Are those numbers going to get blown up? Probably will, because with this productivity capabilities, the best product manager, smartest product manager, is going to reach out and grab more. They're going to take responsibility for more.
Yeah.
They're going to engage more. And most importantly, they're going to become smarter than their peers about what's really going on around the product, important, around the tech stack, important, but most importantly, around buyer behaviors, user behaviors, and competitors. It should free up product managers to do what I believe is the essence of the job anyway, is become a market expert, become an expert in the business of the software that you represent in here. So I look at this as a massive breakthrough in productivity, freeing up product managers to basically do more of what the highest value part of the job is. It
Absolutely.
also should reduce, and I'm looking forward to this, some of the silo mindset that we have around product versus engineering versus UX versus QA versus marketing, and I could go on and on and on, right? That when we start deploying agentic capabilities, those entities, those tools will not care about the data being sitting in a marketing database versus a Jira database. You just don't care. It'll go find the data and it will drag the necessary pieces together and start to aggregate, analyze based on the broad availability of data.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. That's a great spread on that. The way I'm really thinking through is of two segments of productivity levels for product managers. One segment is really about, with the help of the generative AI, what can you do on a daily basis with the jobs to be done. That's the first segment. I mean, the reason why I say the first segment is that is in the short term, that is a lot of productivity to be gained, is one part of it. And the second part is really about how do we use the agentic AI workflows within the enterprise systems in a way that it's not really like a user initiated workflow, but then they are all completely orchestrated workflows in a way where the moment as a product manager I provide the set of requirements, then there is this whole business test cases automatically created, and then product manager is just reviewing them and accepting them, and then they're automatically going and sitting in Jira and then getting assigned to the right person. Again, this is not a science fiction at this point of time. These things are
No,
happening.
It is live right now, right?
Right? So, I mean, from that angle, Mike, let's think through the whole of the product management continuum in a way, right? I mean, you have the strategy piece that every product manager is responsible for, and then unfortunately, everybody gets dragged into the minutiae details on the tactical side every single day, whether it is about writing some of the epics, stories, use cases, and then making sure that it is well represented and communicated well with the development team. And the same thing is getting the feedback from the customers and understanding the customers. Right now, it is such a huge manual task for every product manager at the end of it. And that's exactly where, if we actually kind of completely break down every single day what a product manager does, and at this point of time, I feel at least 70 to 80% of the daily job can be highly productive when you use Gen AI. What I mean by that is simple things like, when I want to really understand a particular user journey or a customer journey from my customer point of view, previously that was all embedded either with a lot of sales teams that are out there, or you need to set up time with your customers to really go through those workflows. But now there is a lot of that information that is out there. You can go through these documents, you can extract the summaries of the use cases and everything from your current customer conversations, which would have been couple of days of task if not for Gen AI, for example, right?
Yeah, and I think that we've been sort of packaging and talking around the productivity piece, and I think you're now at another level of detail that says all of this is possible. And there's an interesting article. In fact, I think you may have referenced it the last couple of days, but I love to go to McKinsey occasionally and look at stuff that they write. They've got a good content creation enterprise. The name of the article, just for people, is called Super Agency in the Workplace. And one of the things that they point out in this article, it actually came out, I think, in January, so it's not brand new, but it's recent. There's a lot of people, a lot of companies, somewhere north of 90% of the companies out there are making these massive AI investments. And I'll call it experimentation. And that's what you are, in my view, what you're describing is the phase of experimentation. And one of the things that I think the article points out correctly is that the level of maturity that we all have right now is pretty low. So we haven't done the right
Yeah.
framing of requirements around our own internal company workflows to get the integration the right level. And if we experiment, which is a great thing to do, that's wonderful, that's important, that's where the learning comes from. But the next stage for companies that are going to create a breakthrough, it's going to have to come from some tried and true methods of productization, whether you want to lean into product management as a model, you want to lean into project management as a model, or program management as a model, where those disciplines which we know and we've lived with for a long time have to come into play. So we start by the age-old phrase we all love to say when we're in product management: what problem are we trying to solve? And the problem you've described is multidimensional and it's layered, right? So we're not going to be able to come in and solve the entire workflow of product management in one fell swoop. And we're also not going to get there by experimentation. Let me stop for a second and do a disclaimer. I am not a an AI expert. I'm not. I am an expert in product management methods and product management methodologies and product management workflow. And I look at AI, whether it's the LLM version of AI or the agentic AI version, as a productivity aid to the job that needs to be done. The product management spectrum, you use the pragmatic marketing framework sort of as a baseline at the beginning of the conversation, has some 30 odd activities,
Yeah.
jobs on a framework. So we know we can't grab all of that and go implement it all at once. So I would say you'd approach this in prioritization. What's the most important part of the job? We can have a debate about that, but not today. And then start to look at the things that can be done by using tools, agentic AI tools, classic GPT type tools, to help facilitate, ease the friction, accelerate the work that needs to be done. And I think at some point in the future, and I don't know where, and I don't think anybody else does either, we'll see this start to converge. And we're going to find that there's waste that will be taken out of the process because it's no longer needed. One of the things I talked about earlier was this whole notion of silos. The most exciting thing I think about this is the potential for proper AI experimentation and well thought out AI programs and experiments to remove the silos that exist inside most SaaS companies, which to me is responsible for probably most of the failures and most of the waste that happens in our industry.
Absolutely. So, Mike, I mean, that's actually a great segue into our next segment, which is the whole aspect of in the last 10, 15 years or so, product management has become so specialized. There is a growth product manager, there is a landing page product manager, there is an analytics product manager, database product manager, and then AIML product manager. I think, people, I feel they have overused the product manager when who they really want is really a technical engineer in a way. But now I feel it is actually a greater chance where the whole of product management will become much more of a generalist, really focusing on the product and solving the right problems and working with the customers, rather than getting into the real nitty-gritty details about the landing page, the sign up page, sign out page, and whatnot, especially because especially the entire replet, lead code, some of these automated code generators actually getting to such a greater level of extent where they are generating these apps kind of, in 10 minutes you have a working app in a much more deeper integration way. So with that as a context, for me, it's always the question of, yes, I mean, as a product manager, right now it is not the question of Suresh versus AI. It is the question of Suresh and AI, and how do I become much more productive and much more useful, so that it's really about the customer now, right? Because previously there is this whole process that I have to go through. There's a product management process. I need to get through these 10 things that I have to do. Yes, I mean, even now you have to think about the problem. You need to think about the competition. You need to think about the features and the strategy, but there is much more deeper help. Uh,
So one of the things that I think we're living with an unintended consequence of, and you alluded to this earlier, of Scrum slash Agile, and I am a proponent of Agile methods. But one of the unintended consequences has been that we have created a perceived need to draw product managers closer and closer to the technology stack. And clearly, I'm going to pick a timeline 25 years ago, or 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago, because of the uncertainty of building, the cone of uncertainty around building, and the fluidness of requirements, as we have referred to them as, or stories, that there was a need to have someone proxy and interpret.
yeah,
The risk of doing software development, the uncertainty in software development is probably lower. It's certainly lower at this point in time than any enterprise that I've seen, that we have developed and spent a lot of money and energy and training and time building teams and building practices and methods that have made the job of building software much easier. But we still haven't adjusted to answer the question of effectively answer the question of what problem are we trying to solve. So we have a lot of product managers that are adding and facilitating some level of value around a tech stack. Maybe it's too many. I don't know. In some cases, it's probably the right mix. In some cases, it's probably over rotated. And as these tools, agentic tools, come into play, we're going to find out, I believe very quickly, that those roles, those highly specialized roles, to your point, aren't as valuable. They're not going to be contributing as much to the release slash process as we want. The other thing that's happened, and everybody in our space knows this, is that we have a customer who is now and or user, or I divide these people into three distinct areas. I call them buyers, users, and customers. Customer represents the entity to me. Users and buyers represent the individuals, and they're not one big bucket. There's a nuance. And so we have a group of buyers who are reluctant to engage. We have a group of users who are finicky about what they're willing to shift and move to when we enter into offering something that's quote unquote faster, cheaper, better, and their willingness to move to it. And we have customers in the organized sense that are much more discerning and a lot less loyal than they ever have been before. So what does that create the gap? The gap is understanding and having empathy and knowing what our buyers want, what our buyers are motivated by, how our users behave in a day-to-day. You referenced the jobs to be done concept, and then how we compare relative to the customer entity, relative to other choices available. And so I think we're going to see a natural shift, a natural rotation back out toward your brand man label of understanding the marketplace more, because that's something that, at least at this point, AI is not going to be proficient or superior at doing other than a human being. And so I think there's going to be, you called it generalization, but I don't think of business acumen as a generalization. I think of it as a discipline in its own, of understanding the nuances of buyer behavior, the nuances of user needs, some context where there's job to be done or something else, and most importantly, overlaying the return on investment criteria so that we look at surveys, and I think this is Product Board, there's a tool company pushed out a survey last year that ranked the priorities or the metrics that most product teams are now using. And as of the end of last year, growth, revenue growth is now the number one criteria to judge success. That's different. And I know that's different because I spent a couple of years working with product teams around a portfolio in a large PE firm, helping them trying to understand the need to shift to a more ROI, business-centric view of how they decided and prioritized what work was to be done. So that's coming, and I think it's coming very quickly.
Yeah. So, Mike, the one of the biggest thing that I keep tracking is, for example, a lot of companies are saying we're not going to recruit engineering teams anymore, especially in 2025. And then there is a certain way to think about, even 2026, because I think, of your earlier comment as well, as an engineer now I can be much more productive, maybe even 40-50% more productive by using some of these AI capabilities. And what that really means is the ratio of the people that can produce the same level. Previously, if you need 10 people, right now maybe you need 6 people or maybe even 5 people. In that way, the same thing will happen to product management angle, which is previously, for a $1 billion company, if there is a team of 20 product managers, now that's absolutely going to reduce, just from the point of view that each product manager can essentially be much more productive on their own. That's one part of it. But then the second part really is the whole combination of how we are really thinking through on the engineering teams, the QA teams, and the product management teams. With the whole AI, there is that breakage that will happen, in my view. What I mean by that is, previously, when we think about the quality assurance, QA as a role, there is a lot of friction between engineering and QA as to say, oh, you know what, these are corner cases, so that is not the business value. And then there is always PM that gets in, and then either as a tiebreaker or not. But then right now, I feel it becomes much more of a seamless process with AI, because you are not assuming a lot of these customer use cases anymore. And there is a direct input from customers on how you are really creating those user stories, use cases. And that's really where I feel, especially in the short term, there is going to be that much more productivity gain. for product managers, for sure. But Mike, the one aspect where I'm really thinking through is a lot of young people are now definitely are thinking through as to say, you know what, no, I love building products. I want to be in a product management role. What do you think is really the right way for them to think about as they get into the product management roles in 2025 and 2026?
Well, there's a lot in that question. Um, but I don't think it's drastically different than the advice I would have given somebody 5 years ago. While you sit on the precipice of this explosion in AI, and this is really early, this is if this is a marathon, you want to use that kind of analogy, we're at mile 2, right, in a 26-mile race. So don't get overly excited and don't screw up your pace because you've got a long way to go. And I think if you think about your career that way and you want to start in product management, I would advise somebody, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, get a strong, and you want to do it in technology or in SaaS, get a strong baseline of technology, whether that's formal education in engineering or computer science or whatever STEM structure you want. But that's just the beginning. That is the foundation. And then diversify your skills and learn how a business actually works, the business of technology. And if I had a a a, a critique of people that have come into this job, and it's not their fault, they were doing exactly what we asked them to do and doing it in the ways we asked them to do. The premise of the last 10 years was every business goes straight up and to the right, so growth is everything, and therefore we can enter a role and there will be naturalized growth and you'll accelerate your career as a result of it. That has changed, and that trajectory is no longer a 15-degree slope up into the upper right hand quadrant of a graph. It's going to be a little different. So the product manager who's starting out has an opportunity to get a really strong foundational view of technology by formal education, and I would say stop there. Do whatever you can to get an entry level job, but learn the business of software, learn the business of SaaS. And that doesn't come from just studying and reading books. You take a really outlier job, go into customer success for 2 years and
Yeah,
read and hear and live and breathe the life of a customer where it actually happens right there on the front line, right? This person's got a job, their career is on the line just like yours. They're trying to close, if it's an accounting applicant, trying to close the books on 3 days after the close of the month, and your application, your platform, because of bugginess in the last week, is stopping them from closing the books. You're threatening their job. And you need to hear that, and you need to sense it, and you need to feel it, and you need to get the angst of it. And hey, my company is kind of screwing these people up in terms of doing their work.
yeah,
And we can develop empathy from that. So I'll get on a rant for a minute. The danger I feel with AI and its rapid ascension is that people are starting to build as a proxy for empathy, and it is not. And I'll say that until the lights go out. It is not a proxy for empathy. It is a way to summarize, aggregate, and do deep dives and super high powered searches on data, especially unstructured data that we spend days with. But hearing it from the mouth of a living human being can't be replaced by any agentic tool or any LLM tool. And I caution people not to do that. So you need to touch base and be engaged with the world. That's stage 2 of the career. And then I'd say figure out the right company to become a product manager in, because if you go to work for a company that's not committed to running the business with a product oriented view, meaning that they don't deploy the right kind of resources, or they view product management as an afterthought or any of those kind of things, then you're going to have a really frustrating time in your entry level job and your entry level experience. So if you go to a company that actually knows how to do product management well, and it prides themselves in doing that and makes their marks on doing that, you can have this phenomenal run and this phenomenal experience, however far it takes you. But what you will have is an understanding what good looks like in a role, and all of the aspects that we've been talking
yeah,
about more high level and hypothetically become real for you. And you actually can see the outcomes. It's not just theory. It's like, hey, if you do these things, it actually works. That's really important. That's the experience I had. I went to and it didn't have to be a large organization. I went to a company with 750 employees that but believed in product management as an actual discipline, and it was respected. And I had these really amazing things happen really early in my PM career that probably wouldn't have happened if I'd gone somewhere else. And so when I went to the next company as a VP and it was really messed up, I knew how to fix it. I knew what needed to be done right. I had all of these mentors around me coaching me on how to do this job the right way.
Absolutely. So, a follow up on that, Mike. So, one of the frustrating things that a lot of customers really talk about is, hey, you guys are building products without really understanding what a user is going through or what a business is going through. And as an example, there are a lot of companies that are in the vertical industries, the SaaS businesses, for example, somebody building a ERP, supply chain, or fintech solutions, or a payment solution, and whatnot. And now, when we really think about the product manager, let's say if I get into a gene therapy company as a product manager, I have no idea on gene therapy, for example. But what I do believe with the generative AI now that is happening is there is a little bit of democratization of the domain knowledge, is what I want to talk about it as. Which is previously, if I had to spend months and months really talking to my customers and salespeople and whatnot to really understand what the company is doing, what the domain is, and the knowledge of the products that I'm working on, it used to be months and months, but now there is a great amount of help for me to get started and to make sure that I'm not necessarily talking about, that is a replacement for talking to people, but I have a stepping stone in terms of the domain knowledge. And then the whole aspect of, Mike, you rightly talked about the empathy, because at the end of the day, it is really about me understanding domain aspects of the challenges that we are trying to solve, and then going to the customers and the sales teams that we kind of really have to work with. What do you think from that point of view? Is GenAI going to be a domain equalizer so that a lot of PMs can actually go and transfer across the domains, or do you think that's still going to take some more time?
So to me, the idea of taking months to learn a domain is not an untenable scenario. And I take two different distinctions. So more than once in my career, and I'll make this really short, I have been thrust into domains that I had no previous background in. I became an quote unquote knowledgeable working knowledge in telecom. There's two aspects to it. First was to learn the vocabulary, right? Every domain has its own unique language. The second one was to understand what the vocabulary actually meant. And the third element, actually, I said two elements actually. And the third element was when I had conversations with users, customers, executives as a PM, that they knew that I had enough credibility to understand the world that they're living in. So when I think about this in that context, there's no way to take a pill or read a summary from an AI readout and shorten that, because it comes in three stages and the mind and learning takes time. You could probably short circuit the vocabulary part of it. So you'll understand your gene therapy example, understand the key nuances, concepts of gene therapy. That would still take me a long time. And others, maybe they can do it faster. And then you have to understand what those words mean and that vocabulary means in the context of your company's
Yep,
business. That
absolutely.
takes time. And you can play with chat GPT for days and weeks, but it still takes time. And then you have to go out and convince your peers If you're going on as a thought leader on a sales call, your sales team will have gone through the same cycle. Well, you better know more than they do. Otherwise, they're not going to invite you into the customer base. So you're going to have to supersede their knowledge. That takes time. And then you have to sit with the domain expert, your customer, and show that you can actually identify and relate to them. I don't see how that stops being months. I don't see it until somebody invents a download. But I think people, we all need to do this. Stop thinking about learning as a chore and start thinking about learning as an adventure and a journey. And then the time cycle will shorten and our knowledge quest will be more fulfilled. So I would say somebody moving from fintech to gene therapy as a domain shift probably is going to take them, even if they're the brightest of people with the best of degrees, it's probably going to take them at least a year or more to become functioning in that role. I don't know how you short circuit that.
Gotcha. So, I mean, as part of the last segment of this discussion, Mike, I'm wondering, how should companies, especially the VP of product management or a chief product officer, should be thinking about incorporating AI into their daily work schedules? Because at the end of the day, it is one thing to say, you know what, you guys go do what you need to do, versus should this be a top-down approach at all, is the last question that I have for this segment.
I'm really glad you asked that. And it's two parts to it. I kind of alluded to this earlier, which is this idea of experimentation to reach a point of maturity. The piece that I think I left off was the role of senior leadership in helping shape this journey and this adventure, that it has to be top down. It should be bottoms up from the groundswell. People should be interested, engaged, curious, having fun even. I mean, if you really get into some of these tools, what they do is pretty amazing. There's nobody that I know of that hasn't walked away going, okay, I know I used to take a half day to do this, and here it is 30 minutes in and it's done. Is it perfect? No, but it's good enough to take the next step. So we're all experiencing this productivity rush. But in order for this to have organizational impact, leaders need to understand AI well enough, and they need to understand their businesses within their silos well enough to understand where can we get leverage, where can we get gain. And I borrow a phrase now that I use, the niches, the riches and the niches. Where are these tiny little areas where we can tweak and tune our business practice and our processes to give us outsized gains if we do enough of them? I'm not going to step into my product management team and say, okay, guys, let's huddle up. We're going to change how we do discovery, because that's a huge upside down change and restructuring of processes and everything else. But if I came to them and said, I'd like you to start looking at some discovery tools that are using specific AI capabilities, and over the next 6 weeks, over the next 3 team meetings, whichever timeline you want to use, we're going to have you all come in and do a report out. And at the end of it, we're going to make a decision on one discovery tool. For what, better or worse, we're going to pick one and everybody's going to use it. Why? Because there's riches in those niches. If I get everybody using the same tool, we may throw it out in a year. But if I get everybody using the same tool to start with, we will supersede the knowledge, because the entire organizational knowledges will go up, right? I have some people who will become experts in it and love it. Well, if some people will struggle with it, well, guess what? The experts will teach the people struggling how to come up to some normal curve, versus having 5 people using 5 different ways of doing the same task.
Mike, thank you for that, because I want to actually double down on that particular advice, because at the end of the day, I mean, running Sales Table, we actually work with hundreds of sales leaders, Mike. And as part of that, the one thing that we are realizing is the frustration that a lot of sales leaders also go through, because there are these hundreds of tools that are out there, and then reps and AEs and whatnot, they use a bunch of different tools, which basically means after a quarter, after 2 quarters, you have no idea what is integrated into what, and then there is no standardization, and that becomes difficult.
If you're getting a problem, hitting a wall, you don't know if it's user problem, knowledge problem, process problem, tool problem. You have no way to discern, and this is just across the board. You have no way to discern, Have I got a skill problem with some specific individuals, or is this really a broken process? You don't know what to fix. So standardizing on a tool, I think, is critical. So, and I'd say that for somebody who's running, I've run sales teams, somebody who's running sales leadership should be helping corral the team around a set of tools, and make it egalitarian. Do an election, do a democratic process. Hey, we picked this tool because on a scale of 1 to 5, it's a 4.2. It's not the best tool out there, but it's the most practical one for us, and let everybody go forward. Just like you wouldn't have 7 salespeople using 3 CRM tools. You shouldn't be doing this either.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mike, this has been super helpful, at least from my point of view. The way I'm thinking through this is, as product managers, the role is absolutely exciting. I loved each and every day that I spent as a product manager, for sure. And for all of us to be really thinking through on the net new innovation that is happening, make sure that you really understand the jobs to be done in your current role, and see which of them can be brought in higher productivity using tools. That's definitely one part of it. And the second biggest thing is really kind of look out. I mean, there is so much of understanding and innovation that is happening around your area, whether it is from the LinkedIn posts that you can probably understand from, or otherwise. Definitely be open to the new ideas and the new tools that are coming out there, because things are rapidly changing. What I kind of loved about a month ago probably may not be the same thing. That's also, I mean, I would say, Mike, is partly the frustration point, which is the things are evolving so fast that it is very difficult to keep up for even a very highly enthusiastic product manager in that sense.
I
But I
think
mean, with that, Mike, I mean, I'd love to get your final thoughts before we close out.
so. I'll share a quote from an interview that I watched Satya Nadella give. I think it was the end of last year, beginning of this year. And it was a long interview and it was well quoted. And he predicted the end of SaaS as we know it. But there was one segment in there where I said something I just took to heart. And it says, "Don't fall in love with your moat. You will get attacked." And he was offering that in the context of companies thinking about competitive advantage and defensible positions. But for me, the application to your own personal career is absolutely relevant. Don't fall in love with the skills you have today, because they are going to become obsolete. That is what's clear about the realm and the era that we're in right now. Fall in love with your ability to learn and adapt.
Absolutely. All about learning and adoption. Mike, really great talking to you on multiple topics. And then I feel this actually calls for, potentially a second view, which is where we should actually get into the favorite LLM and actually, get the things going for a product manager and build out things. That will be super
I'm
fun.
gonna have to defer to somebody who actually knows, has depth on AI, LLM tools, and agentic AI. It's not me. I'd be glad to sit and help orchestrate or facilitate or ask questions, but I'm not that expert. But I appreciate the offer.
No, absolutely. Mike, thanks a lot for the time. And we will absolutely come back again with some interesting episodes going forward. Mike, thank you so much.
Appreciate the offer. It's always been fun to talk to you. This was special. Thank you very much for having me.